The morning sky on New Haven glowed with colors that should not exist. Streams of purple and gold light danced across the heavens like angry spirits. Elder Zenth watched from the crystal tower and felt fear touch his heart. In all his 300 years, he had never seen their son behave this way. "Elder, the readings are getting worse," said Kira, his young assistant. Her crystalline skin flickered with worry patterns. "The solar activity has increased by 40% since yesterday." Zenth closed his eyes and sent out a harmonic pulse to the planetary network. Every Zephyrian on New Haven felt his call and responded. Their combined song painted a picture of terror in his mind. The sun was dying, and it was taking their world with it. The Zephyrians were not built for disaster. Their bodies were like living crystal, beautiful but fragile. They spoke through music and lived in harmony with their gentle world. For thousands of years, New Haven had been perfect for them. The sun was stable, the weather was mild, and radiation levels were almost nothing. But now everything was changing. Solar flares erupted from their star every few hours. Each one stripped away more of their atmosphere. The radiation levels climbed higher and higher. Soon, their beautiful world would become a dead rock floating in space. "How long do we have?" Zenth asked, though he feared the answer. Kira's song became sad and low. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we are lucky. The atmosphere will be gone by then. 3 weeks to evacuate 50 million Zephyrians." Zenth felt his crystal heart grow cold. Their ships were small and built for short trips. They could never move everyone in time. "Send the distress call," he said quietly. "Send it to everyone." The message went out across the galaxy through quantum relays. It reached every major civilization in the known systems. The call was simple and desperate. New Haven dying. Solar activity destroying atmosphere. 50 million souls need evacuation. Please help. The first response came from the Andromedan Council. Their message was cold and calculated. Risk assessment complete. Probability of successful rescue: 12.7%. Probability of fleet loss: 87.3%. Mission declined. The Centaurian Trade Federation was next. Operational costs exceed available budget by factor of 15. Economic analysis indicates mission unfeasible. Regrets. The Vegan Empire sent a longer message. Military analysis complete. Target system shows extreme solar activity. No strategic value to justify fleet deployment. Resources better used elsewhere. One by one, the responses came back. All negative. The Altarians said they lacked suitable ships. The Rigel Collective cited temporal conflicts with scheduled operations. The Tau Ceti Alliance offered thoughts and prayers, but no ships. Elder Zenth stood in his tower and watched his people below. Children played in the crystal gardens while their parents worked. They trusted him to keep them safe. But what could he do? The greatest civilizations in the galaxy had all said no. "Elder," Kira called softly, "there is one more message." "From whom?" "A place called Earth. They say they have never heard of us before, but they will come." Zenth looked at the message display. The transmission was rough and full of static. The technology seemed primitive compared to other galactic communications, but the words were clear. "Earth acknowledges distress call. Human rescue fleet assembling. ETA 72 hours. Hold on. We are coming." Earth? Humans? Zenth had never heard these names before. Where are they from? Kira checked the galactic database. A small planet in the Orion Arm. Very far from the main trade routes. Classification shows it as a Class 12 death world. A death world? Zenth felt confusion ripple through his crystals. Why would anyone live on a death world? Class 12 death worlds were the worst kind of planets. High radiation, dangerous weather, toxic atmosphere, aggressive life forms. Most civilizations marked such worlds as unsuitable for intelligent life and stayed away. The database says they evolved there, Kira said, her voice filled with wonder. They actually evolved on a Class 12 death world. Zenth could not understand this. How could intelligent life develop in such horrible conditions? What kind of creatures would these humans be? Elder, should we accept their help? Kira asked. The other civilizations all said the mission was impossible. Zenth looked out at his people again. The sky was growing brighter as another solar flare erupted. He could feel the radiation levels climbing. In 3 weeks, everyone he loved would be dead unless someone helped them. What choice do we have? He said. Send our acceptance. Tell these humans we welcome their aid. Across the galaxy, other civilizations learned of the human response. Many laughed. The foolish Deathworlders would fly to their deaths for strangers they had never met. Some felt pity for the doomed humans. A few were curious about what would happen. The Andromedan Council sent observers to watch the disaster. The Centaurians placed bets on how quickly the human fleet would turn back. Even the Vegan Empire dispatched ships to monitor the situation, though they stayed at a safe distance. On New Haven, the Zephyrians waited. Their harmonic songs filled the air with hope and fear mixed together. Children asked when the helpers would come. Parents tried to stay calm while packing what little they could carry. The solar flares grew stronger. Each one lit up the sky like an angry god. The radiation meters climbed higher every hour. Plants began to wither. Animals fled to underground shelters, but the Zephyrians held on. Somewhere in the dark of space, ships from a distant death world were racing toward them. No one knew if these mysterious humans could actually help. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy had said it was impossible. But impossible or not, help was coming. Elder Zenth stood in his tower and sang a song of gratitude to the stars. Whatever these humans were, they had answered the call when no one else would. In 72 hours, they would learn what a death world could produce. The human fleet arrived exactly 72 hours later, just as they had promised. Elder Zenth watched from his tower as dark shapes appeared in the burning sky. The ships looked nothing like he expected. Where Zephyrian vessels were graceful curves of crystal and light, these human ships were brutal blocks of metal and armor. Scars covered their hulls from battles Zenth could not imagine. Weapon ports dotted their surfaces like angry eyes. These were not rescue ships. These were warships. By the harmonies, whispered Kira. What kind of beings build ships like that? The largest ship settled into orbit above New Haven. It was massive, easily 10 times bigger than anything the Zephyrians had ever built. Burns and patches covered its armor plating. This ship had seen violence and survived. A communication request came through. The voice that answered was rough and direct. Nothing like the musical tones Zephyrians used. New Haven Control, this is Commander Sarah Chen, of the Earth vessel, Indomitable. We are here for the evacuation. Sending landing coordinates now. Zenth had expected to meet these humans in the Crystal Meeting Hall, where visiting dignitaries usually came. Instead, the coordinates showed a flat area outside the city. When he arrived, he understood why. The human landing ship crashed down like a meteor. Dust and debris flew everywhere. The ground shook from the impact. Any normal vessel would have been destroyed by such a landing. This one simply opened its cargo doors and began unloading. The first human to emerge made Zenth step backward in shock. Commander Chen was tall and broad, with thick skin that looked like armor. Her movements were smooth, but predatory, like a hunter studying prey. Scars marked her face and hands. This was clearly a creature built for violence. Behind her came more humans. Each one looked like they could fight a war by themselves. They wore thick clothes that seemed designed to stop weapons. Their tools were heavy and brutal-looking. Everything about them screamed danger. But then something strange happened. When Commander Chen saw the Zephyrians waiting for her, she smiled. It transformed her face completely. The predator vanished, replaced by someone who looked genuinely happy to help. Elder Zenth, she said, checking a device on her wrist. I am Sarah Chen. We are here to get your people to safety. Her voice was still rough, but now it carried warmth. She knelt down to bring herself closer to Zenth's height, even though this put her in a vulnerable position. For a creature that looked so dangerous, this was a surprisingly gentle act. Commander Chen, Zenth replied, his harmonics translated by her device. We are grateful you came. But I must ask, how many ships did you bring? We have 50 million people to evacuate. Chen stood and gestured to the sky. More ships were landing around the city. Each impact shook the ground like an earthquake. 112 vessels, plus support craft. We will make this work, Elder. That is why we came. Zenth felt his crystal heart skip. 100 ships seemed like a lot, but simple math showed the problem. Each ship would need to carry almost 500,000 Zephyrians to evacuate everyone in time. Commander, with respect, your ships are not large enough, he said carefully. We have calculated the capacity needed. And, Elder, Chen interrupted with another smile, you have never seen humans work. Trust us. From orbit, the observers from other civilizations watched in disbelief. The Andromedan Council sent constant updates to their homeworld. Humans establishing base camps in lethal radiation zones. Behavior appears irrational. The Centaurians could not understand the economics. Human fleet value exceeds potential rescue profits by massive margin. Operating costs will bankrupt their civilization. The vegan empire watched through military sensors. Human equipment appears crude but heavily reinforced. Ships show battle damage from unknown conflicts. These are experienced warriors. On the ground, the humans worked with terrifying efficiency. They set up base camps in areas where the radiation should have killed them instantly. When Zenth mentioned this to Commander Chen, she shrugged. Our suits handle it, she said, tapping her chest armor. We come from a world with high background radiation. This is challenging but manageable. Manageable? The radiation levels were lethal to every other known species. But the humans treated it like bad weather. They worked in shifts, rotating teams in and out of the worst zones. When their equipment failed from radiation damage, they fixed it with tools and techniques that baffled watching scientists. Is that duct tape? Asked Dr. Valen, the Centaurian observer, watching a human repair a critical life support system by wrapping it with silver tape. Standard human repair protocol, explained his assistant, checking the database. They appear to believe most technical problems can be solved by hitting them or applying adhesive material. The strangest part was how gentle these warriors became around the Zephyrians. Each human seemed to understand exactly how fragile the crystal beings were. They built special transport pods lined with soft materials. They learned basic harmonic communication to keep evacuees calm. Children who were terrified of the scary-looking aliens quickly found themselves being entertained by humans making funny faces. Private James Morrison, a Marine who looked like he could tear through armor with his bare hands, spent an hour teaching young Zephyrian children human songs. His rough voice somehow made the simple melodies sound beautiful. The children sang along in their crystal chimes, creating music that made nearby adults stop their work to listen. How do they do this? Kira asked Zenth. They look like predators, but they act like caretakers. Zenth watched Commander Chen coordinating the evacuation. She moved from group to group, solving problems and encouraging both humans and Zephyrians. Her scarred hands were surprisingly gentle when she helped elderly Zephyrians into transport pods. I think, Zenth said slowly, they are both. Warriors when they need to fight. Protectors when they need to save. The first day ended with progress no other civilization thought possible. The humans had established secure zones throughout the city, set up evacuation routes, and begun moving civilians to the ships. They worked through conditions that should have been instantly fatal, treating mortal danger as minor inconvenience. That night, as the solar flares painted the sky in angry colors, Elder Zenth stood with Commander Chen and watched her people work. Why did you come? He asked. Your ships, your people, your resources. Why risk everything for strangers? Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching her teams load another group of Zephyrian families into transport craft. Because you asked for help, she said finally. Because 50 million people were going to die. And we had ships. What other reason do we need? It was that simple to her. No political calculations, no economic analysis, no risk assessment, just people in need and the ability to help. For the first time since the crisis began, Elder Zenth began to believe they might actually survive this. The second day of evacuation began with a crisis that should have ended everything. A massive solar flare erupted just as dawn broke over New Haven. Radiation levels spiked to 10 times normal background. Every piece of electronic equipment on the planet screamed warnings. Elder Zenth expected the humans to retreat to their ships until the danger passed. Instead, they simply switched to what they called hardened gear and kept working. The radiation that would cook any other species in minutes seemed to barely slow them down. "How are they still functioning?" Dr. Valen asked from his safely shielded observation ship. "Those levels should cause immediate cellular breakdown." His Centaurian science team worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. "Commander, human biology appears to include natural radiation resistance. Their cellular repair mechanisms are extraordinary." On the surface, Medical Officer Dr. Lisa Park explained the science to a fascinated group of Zephyrian scholars. "Our planet bombards us with cosmic radiation constantly," she said while checking radiation badges that showed exposure levels that should have been lethal. "We evolved multiple repair systems, DNA-fixing enzymes, redundant organs, enhanced immune responses. But how do you function with such damage?" asked Healer Sith, her crystal form flickering with amazement. "Damage, Doctor?" Park laughed. "This is just Tuesday for us. Our ancestors dealt with radiation storms, toxic air, predatory wildlife, volcanic eruptions, and ice ages. This solar activity is rough, but it is not trying to actively hunt us." The humans worked in cycles that amazed their observers. They needed only 6 hours of sleep compared to the 12 hours most species required. When one team became too tired, another took over immediately. They consumed substances that would be deadly poisons to other beings. Caffeine that would stop a Centaurian heart. Alcohol that would dissolve Andromedan neural pathways. Private Chen Liu demonstrated this when his coffee maker broke. He calmly opened the back panel and began rewiring it while Dr. Valen watched in horror. The electrical current in that device would kill most life forms, the Centaurian observer warned. "Oh, this?" Chen looked at the sparking wires in his bare hands. "My nervous system can handle small electrical charges, useful when you need to fix things fast." He twisted 2 live wires together with his fingers, causing sparks that made the watching aliens step back in fear. The humans fixed everything with techniques that violated every engineering principle known to galactic civilization. When evacuation pod number 47 lost its life support system, Maintenance Chief Rodriguez simply hit it with a hammer until it started working again. "Percussive maintenance," he explained to the shocked Zephyrian technicians. "Sometimes, machines just need encouragement." When the same pod failed again 2 hours later, Rodriguez bypassed the entire control system with spare wire and duct tape. The repair looked horrible but worked perfectly. Pretty? No. Functional? Absolutely. The observing civilizations could not understand this approach to technology. Andromedan engineering was precise and calculated. Centaurian systems were elegant and efficient. Human repairs looked like controlled chaos, but somehow worked better than original designs. But the greatest shock came when the humans began modifying their own evacuation procedures on the fly. When they realized Zephyrian children needed different atmospheric pressure, they rebuilt the transport pods in hours instead of the weeks such modifications should have taken. Sergeant Maria Santos led a team that literally tore apart a cargo bay and rebuilt it into a specialized nursery for infant Zephyrians. They worked for 18 straight hours without stopping, fueled by energy drinks that would have been classified as combat stimulants by other species. "Do they not require rest?" wondered the vegan military observer. "Our soldiers would collapse from exhaustion after 6 hours of such labor," Commander Chen explained while coordinating 5 different work crews simultaneously. "We can push our bodies much harder than most species, but only for short periods. It is a survival trait. When disaster strikes, humans can function beyond normal limits until the crisis passes. The humans seem to thrive on the stress that paralyzed other civilizations. The worse the situation became, the more focused and efficient they became. When equipment failed, they improvised. When plans fell apart, they created new ones instantly. Engineering Chief Thompson demonstrated this when the main evacuation platform lost power during a critical loading operation. Instead of stopping work while repairs were made, he simply had his teams build a new loading system using cargo straps, metal beams, and a technique he called aggressive problem-solving. "Is this safe?" asked Elder Zenth, watching humans swing between buildings on improvised cables while carrying Zephyrian evacuees. "Safe enough," Thompson replied, adjusting a rope pulley system that looked completely insane but moved people faster than the original powered platform. "We learned to build with whatever materials we have." Monkey bars were popular playground equipment on Earth for a reason. The watching aliens began to understand that humans approached problems differently than everyone else. Where other species saw impossible barriers, humans saw puzzles to solve. Where others calculated risks and retreated, humans calculated solutions and advanced. Dr. James Wright, the mission's chief medical officer, treated injuries and illnesses among both humans and Zephyrians, using techniques that horrified galactic medical professionals. When a Zephyrian elder suffered crystal fractures from radiation exposure, Wright stabilized him using a mixture of human emergency gel and improvised harmonic therapy. "You cannot simply guess at medical treatment," protested Dr. Kethril, the Andromedan medical observer. "Proper healing requires precise calculations and tested procedures. Sometimes you work with what you have," Wright replied while his patient recovered faster than any textbook said was possible. "Human emergency medicine is about keeping people alive until proper treatment is available. We get very good at making impossible work." The most amazing demonstration came when the humans encountered a problem that should have stopped the entire evacuation. A critical power relay failed, cutting electricity to half the evacuation zones. Repairing it properly would take days they did not have. Instead, engineer Kate Morrison and her team created something they called a field expedient solution. They connected 3 different power systems using cables, transformers, and what appeared to be parts from a coffee machine. The entire setup looked like it might explode at any moment. "This violates 17 safety protocols," observed the Centaurian engineering specialist. "Probably," Morrison agreed, while the improvised system powered up successfully. "But it works, and working beats safe when lives are on the line." By the end of the 3rd day, 50% of New Haven's population had been evacuated. The rate of progress amazed every observer. Galactic experts had calculated the evacuation would be impossible. The humans made it look routine. Elder Zenth found Commander Chen standing in what used to be the central plaza, now a bustling evacuation hub that hummed with human efficiency. "Your people are extraordinary," he told her. "How do you accomplish so much with such simple tools?" Chen watched a team of Marines helping elderly Zephyrians into transport pods, while another group of engineers rebuilt a loading platform that had collapsed an hour earlier. "We come from a world that never makes anything easy," she said. "Every day on Earth is a problem-solving exercise. We get very good at finding solutions." "But why share this gift with strangers?" Zenth asked. "Why risk everything for people you never met?" Chen smiled and pointed to a group of human and Zephyrian children playing together near the loading zone. Despite the chaos and danger, they had found a way to have fun. "Look at them. Different species, different worlds. But they are just kids being kids. That is worth protecting." As night fell and the solar flares painted the sky in angry colors, Elder Zenth realized something that changed his understanding of the galaxy. The greatest civilizations had huge fleets, advanced technology, and vast resources. But they lacked the one thing that mattered most when disaster struck: the willingness to risk everything for others. The humans had that willingness, backed by abilities forged in the fires of a death world. They were living proof that sometimes the best help comes from the most unexpected places. Everything went wrong on the 4th day. Elder Zenth woke to alarms screaming across New Haven, and the sky burning brighter than he had ever seen. The star had erupted with a solar flare so massive it dwarfed everything that came before. "Commander Chen," he called through the communication system. "The radiation levels are climbing past all safe limits." "We see it," came the reply, but her voice was strained. "Half our ships just went dark. The flare fried most of our electronics." Through his tower window, Zenth watched human evacuation craft falling from the sky like dying birds. Some crashed into the Crystal City. Others made emergency landings in fields outside town. Smoke rose from a dozen locations where human technology had simply melted under the radiation assault. The observing alien fleets retreated to safe distances immediately. Radiation levels now exceed lethal thresholds by factor of 50, reported the Andromedan science vessel. All biological activity should cease within minutes. But the humans did not cease. If anything, they moved faster. Commander Chen's voice crackled over emergency channels. All teams, this is command. We are implementing Emergency Protocol Alpha. Time limit is now 24 hours instead of 3 days. Move everything that can move. Leave everything that cannot. Zenth did not understand what Emergency Protocol Alpha meant until he saw it in action. The humans abandoned their careful, methodical evacuation procedures and switched to something that looked like controlled chaos. Medical Officer Dr. Wright stripped off his radiation suit and began treating patients in areas where the radiation should have killed him instantly. Suits are too slow, he explained to a horrified Zephyrian medic, while his radiation badge turned from yellow to red to black. I can survive 15 minutes without protection. That is enough to save 10 more lives. You will die. The medic protested. Maybe. Wright agreed while injecting himself with something from his medical kit. But 30 people will live. Good trade. Teams of humans formed human chains to pass Zephyrian children from damaged buildings to working transport ships. They abandoned their protective gear for speed, accepting radiation doses that should have been instantly lethal. Their skin began to redden and blister, but they kept working. Private Morrison carried Zephyrian evacuees on his back, while his radiation detector screamed warnings. When a watching Centaurian doctor asked how he was still functioning, Morrison showed him his medical injector. Radiation countermeasures, he explained, while giving himself another dose. Stimulants, cellular repair boosters, and some stuff I cannot pronounce. Buys us time but costs us later. What is the long-term effect? The doctor asked. Morrison shrugged while loading another family into an evacuation pod. Cancer. Organ damage. Probably early death. But not today. Today, we save people. The alien observers could not comprehend this attitude. Every other species prioritized their own survival above all else. The humans seemed to consider their own deaths acceptable losses if it meant saving others. Engineering Chief Thompson and his team worked to repair the damaged ships using parts stripped from wrecked vessels. They welded metal while radiation cooked their bodies, fixed electronics while their hands shook from poisoning, and jury-rigged systems that should have required weeks to properly rebuild. This is madness, observed Dr. Kethrill from his safely shielded medical ship. They are killing themselves. No, said Dr. Veylan, studying the human behavior patterns. They are dying so others can live. There is a difference. The most incredible sight was Commander Chen herself. She coordinated the entire evacuation, while her body absorbed enough radiation to kill a dozen normal beings. Her hair began falling out. Her hands trembled from neural damage, but her voice remained steady on all channels, directing traffic and solving problems. Transport 7, you have thruster damage. Can you make orbit? She called. Negative, command. Lost 2 engines in the flare. Copy. Dump your cargo at landing zone 3. Transport 15 will pick up your evacuees. Commander, came another voice. Transport 15 is also damaged. Structural integrity at 60%. How many people can she carry at 60%? Maybe half normal load. Any more and she might break apart. Chen was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Load her to 75%. Sometimes you have to risk the ship to save the cargo. Elder Zenth found her at the main coordination station 6 hours into the crisis. She was studying displays showing evacuation progress while medics treated radiation burns on her arms. Commander. You need medical attention, he said, seeing her condition. I need 18 more hours, she replied without looking away from her screens. Medical attention can wait until everyone is off this rock. You are dying, Zenth said gently. Yes, Chen agreed, but slowly. Around them, Humans worked with desperate efficiency that defied all biological limits. They had pushed their bodies beyond normal endurance and entered a state where adrenaline and willpower substituted for strength and health. Sergeant Santos and her team rebuilt a collapsed evacuation center using rubble and determination. They worked while bleeding from radiation sickness. Their movements powered by stimulants and stubbornness. Why? Zenth asked her, as she directed the construction of improvised loading platforms. Why destroy yourselves for us? Santos paused in her welding to look at him through her cracked helmet visor. Because someone has to, she said simply. Because you are in trouble, and we can help. Because walking away is not who we are. The human philosophy amazed and terrified the watching civilizations. These beings would literally work themselves to death rather than abandon others. They treated their own lives as acceptable sacrifices for strangers they had never met before this week. Dr. Wright demonstrated this when the main medical center lost power during a critical surgery on a young Zephyrian. Instead of stopping the procedure, he operated by flashlight while his hands shook from radiation poisoning. I cannot see properly, he told his assistant. Guide my hands. Doctor, if you make a mistake, the child dies if I stop. The child lives if I continue. Simple choice. The operation succeeded, but Wright collapsed immediately after. When he woke up 3 hours later, he was already asking for the next patient. By midnight, the impossible was happening. Despite losing half their ships, despite radiation levels that should have killed them all, despite equipment failures and system breakdowns, the humans were still evacuating people. Commander Chen stood in what remained of the command center, her body held upright by willpower and medical injections. Around her, human and Zephyrian staff worked side by side to coordinate the final phase. 18 million evacuated, reported Lieutenant Park, reading from displays that flickered with radiation damage. 32 million to go. Martyr, Loser. Time remaining? Chen asked. 14 hours until atmospheric loss becomes irreversible. Chen studied the numbers. In normal conditions, moving 32 million people would take a week. In current conditions, it should be impossible. Update all teams, she said. Final push begins now. No one stops until the last Zephyrian is off-world. Elder Zenth watched these humans sacrifice everything for his people, and finally understood what made them different. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had learned to fight death itself and sometimes win. But more than that, they had learned that some things were worth dying for. Their own survival mattered less than keeping others alive. This was not calculation or strategy. This was what they were. As dawn approached and the radiation continued climbing, Zenth realized something that would change galactic civilization forever. The universe was full of species that could build great things, calculate complex problems, and create beautiful art. But only humans would die for strangers and call it normal behavior. The final 13 hours would determine if that was enough to achieve the impossible. The last day on New Haven began with the sky on fire. Solar flares erupted continuously, turning the atmosphere into a glowing hell that should have ended all life on the planet. The radiation levels climbed so high that even the distant observation fleets detected dangerous amounts. Elder Zenth stood in his crystal tower and watched the human evacuation enter its final phase. 32 million Zephyrians still needed rescue, and they had 13 hours to do the impossible. Commander Chen had not slept in 48 hours. Her hair was gone, her skin was burned red, and her hands shook from radiation poisoning. But her voice remained steady on all channels as she directed the most desperate rescue operation in galactic history. Final phase. People, she announced. Every ship that can fly. Every pod that can hold atmosphere. Every piece of equipment that still works. We are bringing everyone home. The human fleet was a shadow of what had arrived 4 days ago. Half the ships were destroyed or too damaged to fly. The remaining vessels were held together with repairs that violated every safety standard in known space. But they still flew, and that was all that mattered. Transport Captain Riley brought his ship down for one last loading run, even though his hull had cracked and his engines were dying. She will make orbit one more time, he reported, while Zephyrian families climbed aboard. Maybe 2 if we are lucky. How many can you take? Asked Commander Chen. Riley looked at his cargo bay, designed for 500 passengers but now loading 800. As many as we can fit. If the ship breaks apart, at least it will be in space where rescue ships can pick up the pods. This was how humans calculated risk. Other species would refuse to overload their ships because of safety margins. Humans loaded their ships until they almost broke, then loaded a few more because every extra life saved was worth the danger. Dr. Wright worked in medical stations that had been moved 6 times as the evacuation zones shifted. He treated radiation sickness in himself and others using medications that were running out. When his medical supplies were exhausted, he improvised treatments using equipment from damaged ships. "Doctor, you need to rest," urged Healer Sith, watching him inject himself with another dose of radiation countermeasures. "Your body cannot take much more. Neither can yours," Wright replied while treating a young Zephyrian whose crystal form was cracking from radiation exposure. "But we both keep working because people need us. That is what we do." Number 7. The most amazing sight was Engineering Chief Thompson and his repair crews. They worked on ships that were literally falling apart around them, welding hull breaches while in flight, rerouting power through systems that should have exploded under the load. "This ship should not be able to fly," observed the Centaurian engineering specialist, watching Thompson repair a transport vessel that had lost half its structural integrity. "Probably not," Thompson agreed, while reinforcing a damaged bulkhead with metal strips and determination. "But it is flying anyway. Sometimes things work because they have to work." He was right. Human technology seemed to function through sheer willpower when all logic said it should fail. Ships with broken engines still flew. Life support systems with failed components still provided air. Communication equipment damaged beyond repair still carried voices across space. The evacuation became a race against time measured in minutes. The atmosphere was burning away faster than anyone had calculated. Each solar flare stripped away more of the protective layers that kept the planet habitable. "Atmospheric loss accelerating," reported Lieutenant Park from the science station. 8 hours until total failure. Not 13. Commander Chen looked at the evacuation numbers. 23 million people moved. 27 million still waiting. 8 hours was not enough time, not even for humans working beyond all reasonable limits. "Update all ships," she said quietly. "Emergency acceleration. Abandon all cargo except people. Abandon all safety margins. We are running out of time." The final phase of the evacuation became something that galactic civilization would study for centuries afterward. Humans pushed their ships, their equipment, and themselves beyond every known limit to achieve the impossible. Transport vessels designed for 8-hour flights stayed in space for 20 hours, running on backup power and prayer. Landing craft overloaded to 3 times their capacity still managed to reach orbit. Cargo ships became passenger vessels. Fighter craft became medical evacuation units, and maintenance shuttles became rescue boats. Private Chen Lu and his team worked in the worst radiation zones without any protection at all, their bodies absorbing lethal doses while they loaded evacuees onto the last functional transports. When asked why they removed their protective suits, Liu explained simply, "Suits slow us down. Speed saves more lives than protection." The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the humans achieved what their computers had calculated as mathematically impossible. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia could not understand how primitive beings from a backwater death world could succeed where advanced civilizations had failed. "They are dying to save strangers," reported the Andromedan science vessel. "This behavior has no logical basis. They treat their own survival as less important than the mission objectives," observed the vegan military fleet. "This violates fundamental survival instincts. They work with broken equipment in lethal conditions and somehow make it function," added the Centaurian economic analysts. "This defies all engineering principles. But function it did. Hour by hour, ship by ship, the humans emptied New Haven of its people. They carried evacuees in cargo holds, passenger compartments, and spaces that were never meant for living beings. They flew ships that should have crashed, operated equipment that should have failed, and worked with bodies that should have collapsed. Commander Chen coordinated the final evacuation waves while her command center literally fell apart around her. Radiation had fried most of the electronics, but humans adapted by using manual calculations and direct communication. Last group loading at Zone 7, reported Sergeant Santos. 300 souls. Civilian transport inbound. Zone 12 complete, called Private Morrison. Moving to assist. Zone 7. Medical station relocating to final fallback position, announced Dr. Wright. All critical patients stable for transport. Elder Zenth stood beside Commander Chen and watched his people board the last ships. The humans had done something that every expert in the galaxy had declared impossible. They had saved everyone. Final count? Chen asked, her voice barely a whisper now. 49,998,743, reported Lieutenant Park. Every soul accounted for. And the humans? Zenth asked quietly. Park checked her casualty reports with hands that shook from exhaustion and radiation poisoning. 87 dead, 412 critical, 2,000 with severe radiation exposure. But everyone who can be saved will be saved. The last human ship lifted off just as New Haven's atmosphere began its final collapse. The planet's protective layers peeled away like burning paper, exposing the surface to deadly solar radiation and vacuum. From orbit, the rescued Zephyrians watched their world die. But they watched it together, every single one of them alive, because humans from a distant death world had decided that strangers were worth dying for. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and looked down at the world they had just abandoned. Her body was failing from radiation exposure, but she had lived long enough to see the mission completed. All ships accounted for, reported the communications officer. Fleet formation complete. Ready to jump to safety. Chen nodded and opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Commander Chen to all vessels. Human and Zephyrian. Mission accomplished. Every soul saved. Initiating jump to safe harbor. The human fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, carrying 50 million refugees to safety. Behind them, New Haven burned under its dying star. But its people lived on. The galaxy would never forget what they had witnessed. The greatest civilizations had calculated the risks and walked away. The humans had calculated the costs and paid them gladly. 6 months later, the Galactic Council established the Emergency Response Protocol, officially designating Earth as the primary rescue coordination center for impossible situations. The resolution was unanimous. Commander Sarah Chen, posthumously promoted to Admiral, became the first human to receive the Galactic Medal of Honor. The inscription read, "For services beyond duty, beyond reason, and beyond the possible." Dr. James Wright, who survived his radiation exposure to establish the Galactic Emergency Medical Service, kept a simple motto on his desk. Sometimes impossible just means expensive. Humans can afford expensive, but perhaps the most important legacy was a simple statement that spread throughout galactic civilization. When disasters struck and hope seemed lost, people would say, "Call the humans. They specialize in impossible." Elder Zenth, now living on a beautiful new world provided by the Galactic Council, maintained a crystal monument to the human rescuers. The inscription was in both Zephyrian harmonics and human text. They pleaded for aid when all seemed lost. The wise said it was impossible. The powerful said it was too expensive. The brave said it was too dangerous. Only Earth's Deathworlders said, "We are coming, hold on." And they did. The humans had taught the galaxy that the impossible was just another word for a challenge they had not solved yet. It was a lesson written in sacrifice, proved in blood, and remembered in the songs of 50 million saved souls. In the end, that was the human way. When someone needed help, you helped. Everything else was just details to work out along the way.